Gentlemen, thank you so much for taking a minute out today. It's wonderful to convene and talk about your project together.
Thank you, Joe.
Great to be here. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. So before we get into it, I want to know, COVID did so many things to scramble and change things that we were all living through, especially for artists. What did living through that time period, how did that affect the way that you approach music and even this project?
I really, in retrospect, I just think of it as this giant unfortunate pause button, which is not in any way to disrespect people that were devastated by that. Like most artists, it derailed a bunch. I had a bunch of cool stuff the spring of 20 that just got canceled. Um, but so there were some course corrections that had to happen, but mostly for me it was a pause button. I think I'm right in saying that it actually had a lot more of a sort of substantive, if you will, sort of stylistic shift effect on Ben. So Ben, why don't you talk about
Yeah,
that?
yeah. Happily. Okay. I was being deferential, but I have a good answer for this, Joe.
Yeah.
So, my career up until that point was predominantly classical. I studied classical music, got a master's in it, and at that time, the bookings that I had about I was starting to book like 2 years out, 2.5 years out, and I had all these contracts lined up in Europe with opera companies and with symphony orchestras for a bunch of stage work. And my wife and I were in the process of figuring out how to find a place in London and split our time and how to raise our kids in New York and London. And essentially, that pause button that Laurence mentioned, I mean, for me, it was more like a complete reset. And to be frank with you, this project wouldn't have happened likely if not for the pandemic. And why the reason I say that is what happened in New York City, and everybody that lives in New York or lived in New York at the time knows this, is that everything shut down except for the jazz clubs. And the reason for that is they were deemed essential venues or essential businesses because a lot of them have kitchens attached.
Mm.
And so a lot of performers left New York and these clubs were open and they were going, who can perform what, who can take the stage. And there I was, available suddenly, and this was something that I had performed a lot as a youngster in jazz bands. I played the trumpet. I had sung with some jazz bands and big bands in Central Illinois growing up, and had even done Chet Baker tribute shows and stuff like that. But I had sort of put it on the back burner in order to pursue an operatic career that was kind of going like this. It was like being on a roller coaster and being like, wait a minute, I didn't want to pick this one, instead of all the others, but there I was. And so I started performing in the basements in New York because of the pandemic. And so I started touring around the country as things started to open up again. And our collaboration happened because I had a date booked at Birdland in New York, one of those clubs, and I didn't have a collaborator. And I called Laurence thinking, there's no way he'll say yes. He'll point me in the direction of somebody, and I said, you wouldn't want to work together. And he said, yeah, absolutely. And so we did a duo show. And I mean, it was, within months, like 2 or 3 months, we had organically booked a number of other gigs around the country, and people saw those and said, hey, you ought to record this. And that's why this album came together.
So, Skywalker Sound, what a great place to record.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was that like? Had you ever recorded there before?
I had Laurence, had you?
No, that was my first time there. I've
Yeah,
been
yeah.
to
I
great
had
studios, but that was my first time there.
Yeah, I had done a number of projects there, other people's projects. I had done some video game work, some soundtrack work, um, both as a part of like hired professional groups and as a soloist. And then Leslie Ann Jones and I formed a friendship, and I did a project right before the pandemic with the Alexander String Quartet, where we recorded some commissioned music and some sort of musical theater music. And I asked Leslie to engineer that. And we were at a different studio in the Bay Area, and we showed up on the first day at that studio. And Leslie said, why aren't we at my home at Skywalker? I can't find anything. She couldn't find the cables and the microphones and stuff. And she's going, why aren't we at Skywalker? And I said, I didn't think I could afford it. And I probably shouldn't say this, but she said, look, come to my home next time, we'll make it work. And so when Laurence and I were looking around, I kind of floated it. I said, what if it's a big room, but what if we tried it out? And I don't, Laurence, you want to speak to like walking in there the first time and what it was like
I
for
mean,
us?
it is a fairly mind-boggling space, especially to be recording a duet project in. It wasn't a surprise. In fact, the opposite was exactly what I expected, and that's mind-boggling, which is this giant room and the telltale white film screen on the one wall, because this is where the symphonies record movie soundtracks. And as a lot of people know, but in case anyone doesn't, when John Williams is recording Star Wars music or whatever, he sets the conductor's podium up so that he's facing a screen, and they project the film sans music so that he can sync his conducting of the orchestra properly with the visual images that he's seeing. So that's this huge room. And the way that Leslie set us up, the piano, the wonderful 9-foot Yamaha Grand, was in the room, the big room, and Ben was in a booth. And anybody that knows recording studios, when we say booth, we usually think of maybe a 7x7 space. He was in a booth the size of a 2-car garage, but it was nonetheless a booth. And so the piano was the only thing in this big room, and Leslie knows that room, and they're able to tune it for whatever particular thing is being recorded. So
Well, and we ought to say for folks that don't, I mean, that you use the word tune and it's such an understatement.
yeah,
From song to song, the walls and the ceiling in that room are these enormous baffles, like floor to ceiling louvers that twist, and the ceiling is all the same thing. So when Laurence says tune, she can literally change the natural reverb of that room and the natural tone of it with a series of controls from the booth, and adjust the sonic space
yeah,
for whatever song we were recording. So that a lot of the piano sound and the reverb and stuff that you hear on the album is that
yeah.
you can.
It's almost totally room. In fact,
Yeah.
I remember talking to Leslie, and the 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 main reason that there's any digital reverb at all is to sort of sound match,
Yeah.
so that it sounds like it's blending right with Ben. If you didn't have any non-analog processed reverb, then it might the sound of the voice in the piano, if you really get into the fine-tuned weeds of it, they might not quite pair up ideally, but 95% of the air sound, the reverb, natural reverb around the piano is from that room. It's just
Yeah.
absolutely amazing.
Wow. So how does it work between you guys? I know jazz tends to be a music where things can be interchangeable. There's a lot of different projects that happen, but what is it about you two that makes this work, that makes this sonically shine?
Well, listen, I'm just going to be uh, very candid about this. We both have worked very, very hard for a lot of years to attain what I would, objectively describe as a legitimately virtuosic level of playing. And I use that word when I'm working with serious singers like Ben, who are intellectually informed, they're studied, they're well versed in the formal history of Western music. I use the word play. He deserves to be thought of as an instrument, and whether you're talking about Chick Corea or Michael Brecker or Wayne Shorter or whatever, people that are playing on that level, they are playing music, and that describes Ben. I know I've worked for decades to get to the point where I am. And when you're doing music work, there's quantitative work and there's qualitative work. So, for instance, you can practice for 10 hours and not get very much done because you're mostly just spinning your wheels. or you can apply yourself to practice in a way where in 3 hours you get so much done that at the end of it you're exhausted. That's the kind of work that leads to the sort of level that Ben and I have both tried to aspire to, and I think in large sense attain. So when you have two instruments that are fine-tuned and flexible and developed to that level, then at the very least, it increases the chance that if you put two individuals together, there's going to be some sort of chemistry. Beyond that, I'll just say, Ben already mentioned Central Illinois. We met on the West Coast, uh, just randomly. Really, it was what it comes down to. But we're both from Central Illinois towns, barely an hour and a half apart. Ben's from Peoria, and I'm from Urbana, Illinois. And I think both of us would. I mean, I know we've talked about this. Our chemistry, and Joe, you're from Kansas City, which is technically Midwest too. Having lived on the coasts, I can tell you that as I've gotten older, I value that Midwestern, just sort of straight shooter, forthright, no pretense kind of thing. And this is not to say that the people on the coasts are all pretentious or anything like that, but there's just a sort of a salt of the earth thing to the Midwestern thing. And we both started resonating with that as soon as we started, especially when we were talking about repertoire, because if you look at the songs on the record, I mean, you've got everything from Joni Mitchell to Rodgers and Hammerstein to Supertramp to Stevie Wonder, and we're talking down this tune list, and it was like, oh, I love that song. Oh yeah, that song, I love that song. It was all from the sort of the lexicon of tunes that we grew up with in Central Illinois, and so anyway, long answer, but I think when you put together uh, two people with the common background and the amount of dedication to developing their musical abilities, I think there's a very high likelihood that you're going to have some really cool chemistry. And then we just got lucky, and ours is extra cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really fun. I'll sort of add on to what Lawrence said about our shared backgrounds. I mean, the first time that we got together at Lawrence's place in Queens just to talk through rep, and we sort of had that conversation that was like, "Oh, you like this prog rock group too? Amazing. We should do one of those tunes." We realized other things that we had in common. I mean, Lawrence studied, well, we both started in the sort of classical idiom, right? I mean, Lawrence's teacher in Urbana was Ian Hobson. And Lawrence, correct me if I'm wrong here. That was high school age, college age,
College.
college. That small world thing.
Classical for those who, yeah, he's classical.
Yeah,
Yeah.
classical pianist, well known, very prolific recording artist. My sister studied with him. And also studied with his wife. So it's just a small world thing. We sort of come from the same classical geographic area and lineage, and similar families, a lot of music in the house, that sort of thing. I think about collaborating with Lawrence, like, if I had met Lawrence when I was in my 20s, we're kind of like two guys who have these sports cars, and like if I had met him in my 20s, we'd be like, racing, right? But the way that he and I play together today, because I didn't meet him in my 20s, is like we're almost kind of driving side by side. We got our windows down, and we're like showing each other like one feature at a time. I'm like, check out my electric windows. He's like, hey, check out this clutch, check out second gear, how my car drives like this. And like it's real, the amount of virtuosity there is thrilling, sure, playing with somebody like Lawrence, but the amount of taste is remarkable too. Patience and selectiveness, and the amount of time that we were able to take with this particular record is luxurious. And I've been sort of thinking about that since we left the studio back in April. There's a long time, when you record a record and then finally people get to hear it, and just listening to it through the mixing and mastering process and going, man, it's like I can hear every instance where one of us just went like, how about this idea? And it's really, slow, and we just get to luxuriate and kind of experience each other's ideas and play off of each other. It's a great collaboration. I really enjoy it.
It's a happy confluence of several things, but the two that I'm just thinking of to mention real quick are, first of all, we already said you're in this amazing room. So the experience of recording in there includes having amazing sound in your cans, which is what the headphones is the slang for that. And so if you're playing in a situation that facilitates expressiveness just by, it sounds like you're playing an already mastered record. Just the sound is amazing. The instrument I'm playing is amazing. The room is amazing. Well, that couples with what Ben was just discussing. I think most people will have inferred this. It's just artistic maturity in his sports car analogy, which I like very much, by the way. If we'd met 20, 25 years ago, like he said, we would have been, let's go. I don't mean like, pretentious, but like, yeah, let's get it. And now he's about 20, he's a slightly different generation than me, but nonetheless, we both have matured to the point where patience is possible. But what I wanted to say, the second thing is, when you're playing, and this is really true of any music, including fully scripted classical music where the player isn't deciding any of the notes, but still the delivery, the expression has to do with this ancient conundrum of, if you're purely in the moment, the ultimate Zen state, then the next moment is something that you're not experiencing. If you're a Zen master meditating, you are in this moment and this moment only. Now, something very close to that state is what we're trying to get into when we perform. But the one little asterisk on that, of course, is that if you're playing music at all, and especially if you're improvising, or if there's flexibility to exactly what you're going to play, then you have to be at least a little bit concerned with that next moment that's coming, because you're responsible for it. Okay. So that maturity, that patience, coupled with these amazing sounds that we were hearing, and I've been giving several times lately, and I know Ben agrees with this, as an example, the track of Nature Boy, the introduction to that song, or the first chorus, where we're rubato, we're not really playing tempo, but the amount of space that's there. When I go back and listen to it, and subjectively, especially if I think about, I know how I used to play when I was younger, which was a lot, guilty of being a lot more in that next moment than I am in the one that I'm in. You know what I'm saying? When I listen to that intro, I'm just like, oh my God, the patience there is palpable. But it never gets ridiculous. There's never a point where you're like, oh, come on, for God's sake, sing the next line, I'm going to sleep here, or anything like that. It's just this amazing sort of sensitivity to the space of the moment, and ushering in that next moment just when it should be there. And this is a phenomenon that I've observed. It's very, very consistent amongst musicians. And I'm talking about gifted, amazing, world-class talents. But when they're younger, they're just in more of a hurry. They just are. And it has to do with how they play tempos. It has to do with everything. And so it's so gratifying to be at a point where the level of maturity that, frankly, I've worked very hard to achieve has happily met a similar artist. And just also to state the obvious, when we're in duet mode, if there's no bass player, if there's no drummer, if there's no horns and no strings, the possibilities for what can happen are amplified exponentially, because he can do something, or I can do something that all you need is the one other person to hear where that's going and adapt to it. And we both we both do that. And if you've got the more musicians you've got there, the more you need charts, you need a game plan because the thing could go off the rails. But with just the two of us, it's like anything's possible.
So what are you hoping the listener gets from this album?
All the stuff I just said.
Okay.
I think of it a little bit like liturgical music, right? Like it's there to, and I feel this way more when we perform live, but you're facilitating an experience, you know. We deliberately chose a set list and a tune list for this album that's predominantly like over 90% of the tunes are really well-known songs. But one of the things that I hear over and over is that, you know, I've heard that song, I know that song, but I've never actually heard the lyrics. I've never actually understood what's happening
Yeah.
in that song. Um, and so, you know, yeah, there's a lot of patience and deliberateness in the album. I think what a lot of people are experiencing is hearing some of these really well-known songs in an entirely new way, and in some ways for the first time, they're actually understanding, oh, there's a story here. And we did, I won't talk about it too much, but we did pull a thread, like a narrative thread through the album. And and I think whether or not folks hear and understand what we think about it, I think my hope is that it facilitates some experience for the listener, that they have you know, an opportunity to think about the themes of the music or the words or just life in general as a result of hearing the album.
I like the line from a recent review, and I'm not quoting it exactly, except for the one main word, which the gentleman said that these weren't so much standard interpretations as they were musical excavations. I love that. Like
Yeah,
we're on a
like a dig.
archaeological dig, you know, mining
Yeah,
these tunes deeply for what all is in there the previous miners missed. It's yeah, and he's absolutely right to refer to it as a journey. That is the idea. Playing music in a way that's meaningful always involves storytelling,
Yeah.
regardless of the technical capacity of the individuals, the excellence of the writing as such, blah 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 blah, et cetera, et cetera. You have to tell a story, and if you really tell a story that's coherent and compelling, you can achieve that feeling of suspended time, so that the people in the audience, ideally from the first note of the set, they're just sort of transported into this trip. And even to the point, and I'll just share this as kind of one of my soapboxes in teaching, but to synopsize it, I've had experiences where someone came up to me at the end of a show and was actually kind of upset because they were like, we drove a long way to see you because we live in this small town that's 3 hours from here, and you don't come there, so we came and you only played for 35 minutes. And the fact is, we had played a 75-minute set, and they loved what they heard, but they feel like they want more.
Yeah.
And they really, their sense is that we only played barely over half an hour. And it's like, dude, we played 75 minutes. Look at your watch. You know,
Yeah.
that's called suspending time. And
Yeah.
that's what you want to do, is make time go away for the audience. And so that will always be, to get back to your question, you know, what do we want people to take away? Well, I want people to have that experience. That's what we're aiming for.
So speaking of that after the show experience and the album in general, where's the best place for people to get a copy and where can they catch you live? You have shows coming up?
well, yeah, we're in Chicago this weekend. We're playing the Ravinia Festival Saturday and Sunday. Um, I don't know how soon is this? Is this going to be up posted before those shows?
It will be early next week.
Yeah, so those will be passed. You can absolutely get our albums at live shows. The next opportunity after that will be at San Jose Jazz in California in December. Um, and then what am I? We're playing in.
Valentine's Day in San Francisco.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
We're
Um,
funny. We've had a lot of shows for a record that didn't come out yet, and
yeah,
and now the record's out, and we've got some shows. But as I mentioned earlier, I've been moving, and Ben's been crazy, and so the getting serious about sort of proactively booking this. Neither one of us has had time to do that yet.
yeah.
So
I think we're gonna tour this in 2026, but in the meantime, you can stream it everywhere, and you can get the CD and the LP on both of our websites.
right.
Okay. And I will put those links in the show notes. Gentlemen, it's great to catch up with you. Thank you so much for taking a minute out. Best of luck with all of it. What a wonderful time. I appreciate it.
Thank
Joe,
you.
thanks so much for having us.